going to see in a second when I start my story, so it's a bit a different one. But let me just try with it. The topic of my presentation is craftsmanship, but due to the lack of time, I wanted to invent a different kind of title, so it actually would be like handcrafted soul. The way this story starts, it's that on a lazy Sunday afternoon, I was in my garden dreaming about surfing Portugal, the waves of Portugal, and I was reading this surfing magazine, and there was this interesting article about a shaper in Germany who was talking about mass-produced surfboards and handcrafted surfboards. And there was a question about if a handcrafted product does have a special ingredient of a soul, or if it's like, let's say, CNC produced or technically produced, and it's like, it's these different aspects. So from here, actually, I want to go back into the history of kind of handcrafted products in terms of architecture. So I started back in the days where with the building of, let's say, of cathedrals. So skilled craftsmen actually were traveling from place to place and transferring their knowledge and everything they learned from one region to the other. So architecture at that time was really tied to a certain region, and so the qualities and the skills actually were specific for that certain region. Slowly this started actually to expand globally. Then if I switch to different architectural styles, then I would just jump to the Art Nouveau era and Victor Horta with Hotel Tessel. And the idea is that at that time also, because this is a strong relation, which I'm going to show later in terms of today of modern architecture, of digital fabrication, that at that time these shapes actually were already produced, but it was like in a different artisanal, handcrafted way. So this actually can be seen as the first example of the Art Nouveau era. Today, when we look at the Casa Mila of Antoni Gaudí in Barcelona, the interesting part is that all this organic facade at that time was all handcrafted. It was all manually produced on site. So there was like different models made before, but it really depended. The quality of the execution depended on the craftsmen that were actually responsible for the execution. So it was really highly skilled. I would call them like artists. Today you have this switch that you have the facade of the Sagrada Familia. You see here these, let's say, the elements that were produced at the times when Gaudí was still alive. And then you have the new concrete prefabricated elements that were produced actually after his death, and before now this, the Sagrada Familia has been finished. So it's this kind of relation of the handcrafted production to modern production processes, and the question if there is still kind of the same soul implemented or the same detail in terms of, because if something is digitally produced, you can also kind of always reproduce it. But if something has a human error involved, then I see it as a positive aspect, and it can't be really reproduced in that way. So going forward, we come to the Industrial Revolution, where actually the machines were taking over the human labor. It was highly automated processes, so in order to create products faster, in a more efficient way. So this was actually also starting to destroy the handcrafted culture. If you go actually I should time to time here, but I think Colette trusts me, so it's. If you go with the next step, this was an easy job, but with the next step, it's also in terms of digital fabrication, how you can scale it up. York also came up with a very good example with this huge 3D printer. And it's also this relation how this technology have also affected the handcrafted process and the artisanal skills. Even today we think with all this prefabrication and digital environments that we actually go away from the let's say handcrafted part.
Will affect the industry. Well, I'm hoping that since we are the most flexible tool that we can probably have at this stage, that they may further facilitate the sort of customization, individualization, kind of deal with this challenge of getting away from a kind of repeat use of standard elements. It's not so much a question of the actual devices, it's really a question of kind of workflows and how to connect, let's say, an efficient way, right? How robotics work.
That's okay, it's not an interview. Basically, in the automobile industry, or you look like aeronautics, we all think they're really, because in terms of architecture, in terms of production, they are always a step ahead. So in terms of techniques, in this example, I just showed the latest model of the Lamborghini Aventador. And basically also here, the carbon fiber body is also, they produce the mold partly also by hand, and it's a lot of human labor and handcrafted labor involved in this highly automated process. In the second step, they try to make a quality check if all these surfaces fit to their constraints. But as I say, still today, this is really a large part of handcrafted work involved into these modern processes. Talking about also Japan and really the, let's say, highly automated country, like Professor Martin Beckelt was pointing out that also robotics kind of started in Japan. And even in Japan, the Shinkansen, the bullet train, actually the nose, the cone of this train is, even today, it's like handcrafted. It's produced by artisanal skilled participants. The reason for that is that it would be too expensive to set up an industrial process to produce those shapes in masses, because they also have to adapt a lot, so it would just like financially, it would not be worth it. We go further to just with a case study. It's this was the one panel, it was a prototype in the office of Mirais de Lebuya in Barcelona, which is handcrafted. It's one of the panels for the Shanghai Pavilion for the Expo in Shanghai 2010. And the idea of this, after talking with Benedetta de Lebuya, it's that basically all of these elements were handcrafted in China, but due also to the fact that the labor there is so much cheaper, and it's not worth to set up this into the industrial process in terms of efficiency. So also kind of each of these elements had kind of a specific human error involved, and they also made it to appear like very special. And besides using the idea of wicker work, and you have like also this material, the natural material, which has a natural coloring, so each element is kind of different. Another case study is the bridge pavilion of Zaha Hadid, where actually all the interior space, as we know, we model it on the computer, everything is a fluid surface, but once you break it up, once you bring it to the construction site, you have to fragmentate it. So it's like, because the scale, it's a different one. Actually, in this presentation, I didn't want to mention the term scale, but we're just one part, because in that case, all this interior had to be reassembled to fragments. And on site, it had to be assembled by the skilled workers in order to create this fluid surface, which then there was like minimal error that has been taken into consideration, the deviation from the original curve, and then how all these surfaces in the interior of the pavilion bridge have been made. So it's again in a very high industrial process involved. As today we can't bring our building one-to-one in one-to-one scale to site, so we always, okay, Palette is waiting, it's about time to finish. To bring to site, it's one thing that what we see on the computer. The other thing is when we come to the construction site. In small scale, we can have like these elements, let's say, produced in a perfect way, but once you have to assemble them, we are on site and there is like unforeseen conditions. So in these conditions, actually, you don't really know what to expect, and also there is like a highly skilled handcrafted labor involved in terms of how to combine those elements. And so the outcome can also be then that this is still, we think it's a really modern process, but then at the end, in small scale, one piece is perfect, but in large scale, in terms of the whole building, it's it can have like a slightly different outcome. There was this case study I was showing in the beginning. It's a question, how can an automated industrial process create unique works of art? So here we go with uniqueness. It's like physical aspects, like dripping of color, which kind of can create uniqueness. And it's also how you could maybe simulate handcrafted skills and tools. So that was just an introduction video. Galapagos, you can use, for example, like all these tools for grasshopper to analyze the surfaces, so each painting can be different because of the different drips of color, and you can analyze these surfaces with tools like Galapagos. The approach of digital fabrication
is really about mass customization.
I hope that please don't tell me that, don't tell me, but Walter Benjamin, just like to finish it off, is like was talking about the shift from the artisanal creation process to the modern industrial process, and the fact that you actually, with this in this process, you kind of lose the relation to memory and to the experience while creating something. And it was more a bit against industrial experience, and it was about re-evaluating, for example, art movements like Dadaism or like art techniques like photography to kind of make a manifestation of new modern times. Richard Sennett in that case was also talking about how can actually the craftsman is desired to make his work good, and it's the relation between physical aspects and also the physical labor tied to the technical values, which I started talking in the beginning with this, where the craftsmen were like traveling from side to side to share the knowledge. So basically, I just I wanted to point out that I think that even today, handcrafted skills are really very much appreciated and also involved in the highly automated industrial process. And I will finish this presentation off with Immanuel Kant saying the hand is the window onto the mind. So yeah, thanks then.